It's a real pleasure for me to introduce today's speaker, which is Sheherazade, also known as Shera for short. Now, Shera is the co-director of PROGRES alongside Ms. Asnim Alyoihana Lanusi. Now, PROGRES is a conservation NGO based in Sulawesi, which was established in 2018. The organization aims to empower the local community in protecting threatened yet overlooked wildlife. So from bats, the program has expanded to tortoises, cuscus, and freshwater species. Shera is from Palu, which is a city in Central Sulawesi, where her love for nature has been nurtured, and she spent most of her childhood outdoors, helping her parents on small farms. Shera received a bachelor degree in biology at Universitas Indonesia, then a master's degree in Wildlife Ecology and Conservation at the University of Florida, USA. She has 10 years of diverse experience working on a wide variety of conservation issues from local to international levels. Now, while co-leading PROGRES, she's currently pursuing a Ph.D. in Environmental Science Policy and Management at UC Berkeley, USA, supported by Fulbright. So definitely keeping yourself busy. And today, Shera will be talking about touching people's heart through bats. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to let Shera share her screen.
Thank you so much, Orly, for a lovely introductions. And thank you, Bats Without Border, for having me and for having the entire teams here. That's our Bats team. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we are live from Central Sulawesi, which is the eastern part of Sulawesi called Banggai. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this webinar from across the world. I'm so happy to be back in a community where I don't need to convince people how bats are incredible or fascinating. I would like to present and also share my journey about our conservation works in Sulawesi, Indonesia, with the title, Touching People's Heart Through Bats. But I want to begin with acknowledging that our organization is co-led by two Sulawesi women. It's me, Shera, and also I have a partner named Asnim Alyoihana Lanusi that Orly already mentions. Unfortunately, or luckily, I'm the only one that's able to speak English. If not, there will be two people here. So I'm speaking on behalf of my team. For webinar tonight, I'm going to present four main things. So first, I'm going to start with the conservation status of bats in Indonesia. I'm aware of the people that presenting in this webinar coming from all over the world. So I'm going to give a little bit introductions on bats in Indonesia. And second, I will introduce on the challenges that we have been facing in a bat protections, and I'm going to bring you all to Sulawesi to see how we built a community-based conservation to protect the bats. And last, I want to close my presentations on what does protecting bats means to the people and also on biodiversity on the island of Sulawesi. So this is Indonesia. We are the largest archipelagic country, almost 18,000 islands. Even me from Indonesia have not really idea exactly how many islands we have, but we are the longest, one of the longest country with a lot of islands. And we are so grateful, even though we are only 1% of the Earth land mass, we have about 773 of mammal species, which a third of them or 30% of them are bats. So I think we have the number one of bats diversity in the world, about 240 species. And not only we have such diversity of bats, we also have a lot of bat species that can only be found on particular island. So for example, we have Acerodon humilis, which is Talaut flying foxes that can only be found on Talaut Island at the border of Indonesia and Philippines. And we also have these Aru flying foxes that no one even really see them in the wild, but they're from one tiny island close to Papua. And regarding to the conservation status of bat in Indonesia, out of close to 240 species, 35% of them are fruit-eating bats, or what we call as theropodids. So they are relatively larger bats and feed on fruits, feed on flower nectars. And these are the focus of our conservation group, to look at the theropodids, or the large frugivorous bats. The main reason, because this is the group of bats that have the highest number of threatened species, which make them our priority in Sulawesi. So if you've seen here, Theropodidae, which is in the left side, has the largest number of species, but unfortunately also the one that are highly threatened. And you're probably wondering what kind of threat that the bats are facing in Indonesia. And I'm keen, or the team also curious, to hear from people here in Africa or in South America, whether is there similarities or difference in terms of threat. So in Indonesia, there are two main threats, which is habitat loss, that comprise of the degradation of habitat for foraging site in the forest, but also in the roosting site. So on Sulawesi, for example, the bats roost on the mangrove, but they will fly tens of kilometers and feed on the tropical rainforest. So the habitat loss threat that they're facing is degradation in the foraging sites in the tropical rainforest, but also in the roosting site in the mangrove, where they can be converted to a large-scale aquaculture, or for the cave bats, the karst ecosystem are being mined for salmon production, for example. So that's kind of the threat from the habitat perspective. And the second of all, our biggest threat, which probably shared by also other regions, is hunting. So if we look at Indonesia from west to east, the hunting of bats occur at different level and for different purpose. So for example, in Sumatra, in the western side, there's a small scale threat that hunt flying foxes for bushmeat. And all the way to Java, you could also find market with a smaller scale of trade for bats as a medicine. So they believe the bat's heart can cure asthma. And if you go to other island also in Indonesia, you can find different types of hunting. They can be hunted for subsistence purposes, but the one that we are focused on in Sulawesi is hunting for commercial trade. So the bats throughout the islands are being hunted to satiate the demand for bushmeat at the commercial level. So it's a very distinct and in a way larger scale compared to other part of Indonesia. And this is Sulawesi as where we are working. And this is Sulawesi flying foxes, or Acerodon celebensis, which is endemic to Sulawesi. And out of so many fruit-eating bats, we prioritize even smaller to flying foxes, which is the exceptionally largest fruit-eating bats in Indonesia. So I think I started to work on bats since 2013 when I was an undergrad and met my mentor, Dr. Susan Sang. And at that time, I couldn't foresee the unprecedented challenges that are faced by bats. But I realized there are two main challenges in terms of conservation. The first one is unequal conservation attention, which I believe many of us here probably notice. In Southeast Asia, many of the conservation attention have been poured to a large charismatic animals in the western sides of Indonesia. And those are the big mammals, flagships, considered very sexy. And unfortunately, bats are not considered very attractive, even though I know many of the participants here disagree, but there is unequal conservation attention where fruit bats, especially flying foxes, are not only left understudied, but also unattended in any of the conservation strategies. And To further challenge the bat conservation in Indonesia is that lack of scientific informations to understand the level of threat faced by bats and also the importance of bats in the ecosystem or also to the people. So one of my very first research is to document and quantify the threat of bats in Sulawesi, where we found that almost 500 tons of bats, which is equal to 500,000 to 1 million of bats, are being hunted throughout the island to supply the bushmeat commercial markets in the northern part of Sulawesi. And unfortunately, these trades are allowed because bats are not considered as protected species. So from at that time, I felt the urgency of bat conservation. This is one of the scene from the bushmeat market. She's actually my mom, and because at that time I was an undergrad, she accompanied me to the markets. But I realized we know the urgency of saving bats and how the commercial trade has been threatening bats in Sulawesi, but we don't really understand what is the importance of bats to the people or to the ecosystem, which brought me to study their pollination services for durian, which is the most beloved fruit in Southeast Asia. Maybe you can put in the chat how many of you have tried this fruit. Is in the Western world is notoriously famous for being smelly, but for Sulawesi people, the smell is so fragrant and it's something that people are loving a lot. So I study that bats actually contribute to the pollination of durian and contribute to the local economy through their pollination services. So with the information on hand that we know the threat level in terms of the bat hunting, and also we knew about the importance of bats, which can help us to build the case or the narrative of bat conservation. But we realized that these informations are not adequate to foster bat protection in Sulawesi because of the second challenge. So there's no legal tools to protect bats. For example, only 3 out of 240 bat species are protected in Indonesia. And then many of the flying fox roost actually outside the current protected area system. So they roost in a mangrove or in a smaller islands, which are not covered by national park or by any type of protected area. And the third, flying foxes are also not considered as priority species at any level in Indonesia. So at that time, we are thinking, to use existing legal tools seems not feasible in a shorter time. Trying to list bats as protected species will take decades, or trying to advocate expanding protected area system are actually not that feasible, or even pushing forward for bats to be priority species are not really strategic at that time because the government have their own priorities and extremely limited resources. So of all those challenges, from the unequal conservation attention from research and conservation perspective to a lack of any conservation or legal tools to protect the bats, we felt that we should give up, but we chose not to. And the reason, because I think we found a glimpse of hope during our field work, working with the local community. So navigating through these challenges make us more creative in terms of finding solution. And by working with bats, we find and offer probably a promising approach to color our current conservation efforts. So throughout our research in understanding the threat that the bats are facing, throughout our research to understand how important they are to the ecosystem and to the people, it really opens up and provides an opportunity for us to build connection and trust with the local community, and subsequently can raise awareness about bats. I think the lack of that formal protections or the legal tools in conservation give us more, I think, opportunity and hope to empower and work with the local community to become bat champions. But I think it's something that most of you may relate, especially being a woman in the field and working with bats. We put ourselves in extremely unusual field sites. So this is the Bat Island, and from the nearby city, I need to take motorcycle for 5 hours, and then I need to take a boat for about an hour in order to reach the Bat Island. And for the local community, for the people there, it really sparked the curiosity why this little girl went so far away and wanted to be delivered on the island. So from curiosity, it developed to disbelief. And on that island, there's no person living there because there were millions of mosquitoes. So this is my own blood on hands while I was staying there for weeks and for several months. So it sparked from curiosity to disbelief, more confusion, why we're staying on this more collapsed fisherman hut. It's gone now because of the storm. But after that, there are a lot of appreciations and eventually being open to each other, to connect. And the local fishermen give it a first try to join me capturing the bats and studying the bats alongside the research. And over time, the local fishermen who used to bring the hunters to the island and take the bats for the bushmeat market start to say no to the hunters. They didn't want to bring them again to the Bat Island. And we've seen at that time, the bats started to come back. And this hope really encouraged me and encouraged the team to further support the works of the community to protect the flying foxes. So I was very happy when Bats Without Border reached out to me because I felt we share the similar values and principle of supporting and empowering local community to lead and to implement conservation works. And voila, after that, a long introduction and a long struggles of the challenges, we finally established our first community-based conservation to protect flying foxes back days in 2018, so about 5 years ago. And our little work is led by me and also Mbak Asnim that I've shown you before. And our approach is to combine community-based approach and the science-based approach. I think our first lesson learned is that we realize science is important, that collecting the scientific evidence about bats, including their threats and their ecosystem services, are really important or significant, but building connection with the community is actually the key to everlasting conservation program. So for the science-based conservation, I'm the nerd one, as you see with the eyeglasses. So I oversee the science-based conservation. Is basically when we try to understand the issue, what's going on, which include the population status of the bats and also the threat that are faced by the bats, which in the beginning, I sit on the hunting throughout Sulawesi for the bushmeat market. And we also use the science-based approach to design suitable conservation programs. So we can address it by reducing the demand of the bushmeat markets. But for us, we choose to empower the local communities so they're able to say no to the hunters and stop the hunting. And they can benefit from the ecotourism, people visiting the island and also see the bats. And we also use the science-based to build the strong case and the narrative. And this is where the durian pollination services come along. And when we say that if there's no bat, there's no durian, it really sparked a conversation and maybe a panic attack among the local community. Oh no, can't eat durian anymore. So that's how we approach our science. And then for the community-based conservation, this is where Mbak Asnim come along and how I also support her to do. So for our community part, we emphasize on building trust and connection with the local community. And during this time, our team, we nurture our empathy, and also we create this culture to always lead and work with compassion, meaning that we need to understand issues, we need to understand what's going on from the people's shoes instead from our own shoes. And for the community part, we are committed to build the local capacity and the leadership in the community that we've worked with. And the last one, we try to ensure the sustainability of our programs. So over time, working in the field or on the desk, we always have these questions on our mind that what will happen if we are not there? So Mbak Anim, me and our team's dream, our definition of success is actually to leave the place and seeing the community is leading the conservation programs, that without us, they're also protect the bats and protect the nature surrounding them. So we have 4 main programs, which is capacity building, research, community engagement, and also outreach. We really emphasize on the capacity building because we would like to produce bat champions and next generation of conservation leaders. So if you seen here in the white shirt is Jagat. Maybe this is 3 years ago when he was still in high school. Now Jagat become part of our team. So we're so proud to have him as a participant from our training and now become our champion of bats and spreading the message of bat protection in his own area. So our capacity building looks fun like this. So we are on the boat, passing through the ocean, learning about conservation as basic as what is conservation, what is research, to measuring bats, collecting morphometric data, and also analyzing what this data means to our understanding about bats and how we can use it to better protect them. So from the capacity building, we realized that anyone can actually be a bat champion. So in our team that say hello to you before, we have Pikra above and also Jagat below our Flying Fox team. So I would like to highlight Pikra was used to be really famous for being the most naughty kid in the neighborhood, but now becomes the role model for the younger kids around him. When he finished senior high school, he tried to work as an administration assistant at local school, but it did not work out. It turns out he likes to be outdoor and in the field. So he joined me and the team to go to the bat island, learning to capture bats, counting them, and with only degree in senior high school, Pikra managed to master the methodology used in bat research, and for over 5 years, he's now leading the local team to study and protect the bats, and also recruiting more and more a young generation in the village to love bats and to actively involve in bat conservation. And after capacity building, we also did a lot of storytelling. Mbak Anim wrote a children book about bats and also durian pollination, and we hope to increase the awareness and nurture the love and appreciation of children toward bats. It's pretty manual because in many remote places, there is not really electricity. So we developed a poster with the bat species and the explanation of their role in environments. And the team went from village to village, talking about first about nature, about mountain, about oceans that they depend on and where they play around. And then we delve into the world of bats or the world of flying foxes and the connection of flying foxes with them, not only with durian, but also with the tropical rainforest in the mountain where these kids and their parents depend on for clean water and clean air. So for over 5 years, we had close to 1,000 kids and youth that join our outreach and capacity building activities. And then the team was so creative. We usually had a movie screening where they can see their own self did activities, were on the boat or on the island, and it really brought the community together through watching the movie about bats and also about their activities in conservation. So we have this little gate, welcome gate to flying fox conservation sites. We have often forum for women. We have also information board on flying foxes. And in addition to our conservation work, we have a lot of community and general environmental programs, for example, waste management, beach cleaning, tree planting, in order to create awareness simultaneously about the importance of environments and nature preservations. So not only about bats, we also work a lot with the local community to create that clean and green environments and protect nature around them. And the last part of the science is to evaluate the impact of our conservation program. So we keep track on how many people are joining our outreach, but we've also keen to, with the local community, to see whether our collaborative effort leading to the increase of bats and reducing the level of threats, and how we can secure socioeconomic benefits to the local community. In 2017, we started with only 300 of bats roosting on the island. And then now, over the years, we can reach up to more than 40,000 of bats roosting on the island. So the island become the safe haven for bats in the district. So it's such a scene to witness, and the team can't wait if anyone here want to visit Sulawesi, want to visit Banggai, and we'd like to bring you to our bat site and also meet with our local community. So we record it every month using emergence count to record the number of bats since the beginning from 2018 to 2022 or also this year. And we've seen that there's the increase in terms of the maximum number of bats. And we also further ask ourselves and also pondering with the local community, what does protecting bats actually means to the people and also the biodiversity on the island of Sulawesi. So bats, flying foxes, even though small, they have a large home range. So this is a scheme of where the island is. So we have the island where the bats are roosting. We have mangrove, we have seagrasses, we have a large expanse of ocean, which include fishing area. And then the bats feed on fruits and also flower nectars in the foraging site in the forest, and sometimes in the agricultural areas. So we've seen that the bats covering this wide variety of ecosystem and species, which make us wondering whether they're also providing more services or whether protecting bats means something else beyond protecting the bat itself. So this is the scene, little bit of the video of the bats. Yeah. So after working a lot with the local community and having a conversation through bats, it turns out the community also start to grow more appreciation toward nature. They are empowered to protect the mangrove or the roosting set of the bats, and they also realize that, from bats, they realize the nature is important, and they also realize that maybe we should not allow people to bomb our fish anymore. So from saying no to hunter, now they guard the sea around the island from the fish bombing. and they also stopped the hunting of the sea turtles. So looking beyond this roosting site, engaging with the bat conservation, it really encouraged the local community to not only saying no to the hunters, they also not culling the bats in their agricultural areas, and notably, they're actively involved in protecting the forest where bats forage, where the community depend on water and air. So we realized that we started small from bats, but it really brought the wider awareness and deep appreciations toward nature, toward the sea, toward mangrove, and also in a way, the community managing their natural resources. Yeah, and this is the sea grasses around the islands. So when the bats were still 300 individuals, looks empty, but after several years, the sea grasses are flourishing. So it turns out the bats poop that are washed from the island to the sea, flourishing the sea grasses, which is the nursery ground for many marine organisms. So in combination of community protection of the fish, the fishermen told us that they capture more fish and also very happy because they don't need to fish far away. So for me, it was coming back again to the island again and again. You could really see the changes. Not only the bats there are way more bats, but also there are no fish bombing, and then the sea grasses and the coral reef are now flourishing and thriving. And of course, protecting one colony of bats is not enough. We realize from our population survey, there are times that the bats are completely gone. And we were so worried, oh no, we were failing. But it turns out, after we eliminated the hunting as a threat, we realized that the bats were gone from the island if there was a big storm. And then the bats, they will move or migrate to a nearby roosting site. So from here, they migrate to about 20 to 40 kilometers to the other side, which were still hunted for the bushmeat trade. So from that, we realized that protecting one colony of bats are not enough. And now we're currently expanding our works to protect several colony of bats, working together with more villages in the district area. And the big message and also the big lesson learned that we realized that from the bats, we managed to build our little organization called PROGRES, which we aim to catalyze and empower local community in leading the efforts to protect threatened yet overlooked wildlife species and ecosystem. So across Sulawesi, bats become the icon of threatened but overlooked wildlife. And we realized that the other species or other wildlife face kind of the same destiny and the same challenges. So the lesson learned from our bat conservation are used to expand our works, to use the framework of combining community-based in a way of nurture a sense of pride towards Sulawesi nature, and also combining the science-based, this framework that we created using science and community to lead with compassion and also to empower the local community as the bat champion. We use it to protect other animals on the island. The journey has not been easy, of course, at the beginning. I think we started with almost zero money, and then for a year, we had a private donor for $150 per month for a year to support our bat conservation, namely paying for our boat fuel. But despite of the hurdles, we're still optimistic and hopeful. And over time, this is a glimpse of our field sites on the boat, and this is our little office. This is Fikra. But with that, with our limitation and simplicity, we believe that each one of us can contribute to something. And really, from bats, through bats, we managed to connect with more people. And more importantly, the lesson learned from bat conservation, we use it to protect more endemic Sulawesi wildlife. So from bats to tortoises, to cuscus at the border of Indonesia and Philippines, and to many more wildlife. We think that if we don't start with bats, we may not even start to understand the challenges or even to create a solution that can work for the wildlife that have been quote unquote forgotten in our conservation. So with bats, we challenge the status quo, we challenge the current conservation prioritization, especially for such an archipelagic country in Indonesia, but also offering alternatives to develop and support more community-led initiative. And our journey enlightens anyone can be a bat champion, that science will be inclusive, having equal collaboration is not adequate, but also we need a full commitment to local capacity building and leadership. So we've worked a lot with journalists, university, from local to provincial governments, and from bats, they help us to direct the world attentions that biodiversity on this region of Indonesia is worth protecting. And I would like to show you our team in front of our office here in Luwuk. There's Patita, Chilo, Pikra, Lilis, Jagat, and also Felix. And this is the fisherman hut on the island that we also stay every time we do monitoring. And lastly, we would like to thank you, our collaborators and our supporters. What bats mostly taught us that the conservation is not only about the wildlife, but also the people that with bats, we are able to connect from heart to heart to build a legacy that lasts for nature to thrive, but also to strengthen the friendships among people who are protecting bats and also nature. So that's all from me, and hope that's our story from the Sulawesi, Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shera, for such an inspirational talk. It's amazing what you have managed to achieve. It's really amazing work. And I really love the fact that you managed to take this community-based approach and really expanded it beyond that first local community you worked with into other areas. If anyone's got any questions, please use the chat to ask questions. And while we're waiting for questions to come up, maybe I can start with something. And what I really wanted to ask you is, so how would you take it further? So what's the next step? So I could see that you're already expanding to other species, expanding to other areas, but are you thinking also about maybe trying to work, instead of a bottom-up approach, a bit of a top-down approach, working with policymakers perhaps to try and change the laws and make sure that more bats are actually protected?
Yeah, Orly, thank you for your question. So part of my work's also to work from the top-down approach, so working with the governments. My previous work is to support the government in North Sulawesi to address the demand side of the bushmeat trade, and also to set up quote for the bat trade. So it's also something that me personally working on, but we realize that that will take like a long time. So in order for it to work, we support and complement that government efforts with the community protections at the ground, so the bottom up. Yeah.
Brilliant, excellent. And, such amazing work. I really hope that more of it will happen across the world as well. We got a question here from Elise saying, amazing talk. Thank you. How did you estimate the number of bats on this island? 40,000 bats from the same species?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Orly, is it fine for me to have Pikra or Jagat explain and I can translate it?
Yeah, excellent.
Jadi ditanya bagaimana kamu hitung 40.000 kelelawar, baru itu spesiesnya cuma satu atau berapa? Nah, Pikra jelaskan.
Ya, itu mungkin mungkin di 40.000 itu ada 3 spesies. Soalnya dia kan terbang jauh, jadi terang mungkin tidak dapat lihat. Jadi di situ terang menggunakan pakai metode hand count, pakai encounter. Jadi per 100 per kelompok. Jadi nanti diklik nanti dikalikan yang ada di hand counter. Terima kasih.
Yeah. So yeah, it's quite a lot of work, Orly. When we started with 300 bats, the team was so happy, and then finally they said, "Kasera, we couldn't do the hand counter anymore. Our thumb's going to fall off." So we modify it. So we did emergence count. So the team, we have 2 teams on a separate boat that were waiting for the bats to emerge. So they use a hand counter and count it as a per 100. So 100, 100, second, 100, third. We had a lot of training, so they were quite trained already to kind of estimate the bats. So that's how we come up with the estimate. And for the species, we have 3 bat species roosting on that island. The black flying foxes or Pteropus alecto, which occur from Sulawesi all the way to the northern part of Australia. We have Sulawesi flying fox, which is endemic to Sulawesi. And we have the gray flying fox or Pteropus griseus that is endemic to Sulawesi and the lesser Sunda. We couldn't differentiate the bats against the sky. Hope we have a magic for that, but we couldn't. But sometimes we did a daily, the day observation to see which bat species that roost at a given time.
Thank you. I've got actually a question that slightly relates to it, or maybe a comment. Have you thought about expanding to using other techniques that will help perhaps monitor the different species, like infrared cameras or anything like this?
Yeah, we were keen. So anyone who want to do more research, please contact us. We learn from Texas, yeah, Orly, they have the infrared camera to count the millions of bats. So
that's what I was thinking about, yeah.
Yeah, we're actually keen. So maybe the team will be happy. So their thumb can rest. But yeah, we're keen to have more technology support to count the bats accurately.
Excellent, thank you. We have quite a few people that said amazing work and it's really inspirational. I'm just going to read one comment that is saying that thank you for making the point that conservation is not just about species, but it's also about the people. And I wonder if you can say a few more words about that, maybe.
Yeah. Jadi mereka bilang pekerjaannya kita bagus sekali, hebat. Nah, terus ada yang bilang, oh terima kasih sudah bikin poin bahwa konservasi tidak hanya soal hewan, tapi juga sebenarnya soal masyarakat. Mungkin Jagat bisa tambahkan, kenapa penting juga untuk bisa menarik masyarakat untuk terlibat aktif.
Jadi untuk orang mau bangun konservasi jangka panjang, jadi perlu keterlibatan masyarakat supaya nantinya orang tidak akan selamanya menetap di tempat situ. Jadi masyarakat yang ikut terlibat nanti itu yang jadi penerus supaya upaya konservasi ini tetap terlaksana.
Yeah, so Jagat and Pikra say thank you so much for all your compliments. It's a very heart warm in the heart. Yeah, so Jagat said that he realized that we cannot be there for hundreds of years. So the leadership of the community is important to ensure the sustainability of the conservation programs. And adding to that, the community has a wealth of knowledge about bats, about nature that actually can be so powerful when we combine it with the scientific informations. And we also believe that the bats provide services that the local community have relied on, even though they're not realizing they've taken it for granted before, but once they're aware that, oh, this is something that we also need, and it turns out it depends on bats, and then it creates more question, it creates more conversations to have more appreciations toward nature. So that's why we feel that people are important.
Indeed, and it's a great message. And I think it's important for any conservation organization to realize that this is really the route towards making meaningful changes. And like you said, long-term changes as well.
Yeah.
There's another comment here from Alberto about great work and amazing how education really can make the difference to protect biodiversity. And I noticed that you had this book that you created about bats. Can you tell us a bit about it? Because it sounds amazing.
Yeah, so anyone who want to have the English translation is now only available in Indonesia. Yeah, so this is written by Asnim, which story about bats and the durian. And we have pictures, for example, how bats poop can grow into trees. So an easy illustration for the children, especially to build the connection in their head, how bats are intertwined with the forest where they play around or where they depend on clean water. So that's the book is about. This is
amazing, and it's such a good way out to interact with people through stories.
Yeah, thank you, Orly.
Cheers. Has anyone got any other questions or any comments that they would like me to read out? There's loads of comments here about amazing and interesting talk and a nice presentation and amazing work. But I'm wondering if anyone has any specific question or comment to add before we close the webinar. Oh, yeah, we got a few. I'm a Sulawesi teenager who has really benefited from this program. Thank you for your knowledge and services. Brilliant. So that's from Rafa.
Yeah.
And we have also here, and I can read it. It's so from Samudio, we have congratulations from Panama for Shera and her team, Rafael and Julieta Samudio. And more comments about this.
Thank you for Panama so far.
But you know what? I think it's the common issues that I experience across the world. And this is really inspiring to get ideas about how you can change things and improve the situation for bats.
Yeah, it's amazing, Orly, to see across the global south, from Africa, from Latin America, there's similar messages how people and bats and nature can live in harmony, that it's something that very intertwines, that should be integrated components in conservations. So that's very hopeful to learn.
Yeah, and it's really great to see the Global South really leading on this and leading on how you can engage with people on bats and change people's minds. So amazing. So what's left for me is just to really thank Shera again for that great presentation, and thank everyone in PROGRES as well, and for the amazing work that you're doing. And I'm really looking forward to hear how you're going to expand this even further and really promote bat conservation across Indonesia, Southeast Asia, the world, maybe.
Hopefully. Yeah, thank you so much, Orly, and everybody for having us. Terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar. And I hope you're going to join our next webinar at the end of June.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.